Good morning, everyone. Are you all happy? Yes. You look happy. Well, it's my pleasure this month to bring you the roots of our teaching. We did not arise in a vacuum. We have a legacy. We have an inheritance. We are a part of a continuum that was started way back in ancient times, but has resurfaced again and again as various ways of speaking about the universe. And what we have here, the science of mind, is a very modern articulation of that ancient truth. I want to just review very briefly with what we've done this month. We began with Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, the little man, the clockmaker who discovered mesmerism, and with a lot of experimentation and hundreds, if not thousands of cases, he came to the conclusion, mind is cause and mind is cure. And that is the foundation of this teaching. And then we talked about Emerson, who gave us God is in everything. It's all through nature. It's in all life. And that we have a genius within. And that we can tap into that genius at any time we choose to. And he gave us so much more. So many famous quotes from Emerson. Thomas Troward last week was a judge, an Englishman who was raised in India for the most part. And he became a very well-known public speaker in Edinburgh, Scotland, and his words were transcribed into a book called the Edinburgh Lectures, which we use as a class textbook. He gave us the logical rationale for this teaching and his mystical sense that this universe is alive. And and today the progressive science says the universe is conscious. That there's something about the nature of life that is aware of being. That's a huge statement, and it's going to really challenge us in the future as a people, but it's going to change everything when we grasp the full meaning of that. So this week we're celebrating the life of Ernest Holmes, the man who was born in 1887, passed in 1960. But during his lifetime, he wrote many, many books. He had a TV show in Los Angeles. He hobnobbed with senators and other politicians and movie stars. And in fact, he and his wife Hazel took in Peggy Lee when she was a young girl who came to LA, and she actually lived with them most of her life. You remember Peggy Lee fever? Yeah. There were lots of movie stars in his centers. He was a very, very popular figure in the early 20th century. He may have been best known, I call him the great synthesizer, that he drew the strands, he followed the strands of truth that he gleaned from world religion, philosophy, psychology, and science, and he kind of wove them into a very practical and understandable teaching that he called the science of mind. And he never really wanted to be a movement. He didn't want to form a church, but he got talked into that by people who said, you have replaced our Sunday experience with your lectures, so can't we reform this? And anyway, it happened. And so it's become one of the world's religions. I call it a spiritual teaching because it liberates the human being to discover truth for themselves. Basically, our message is whatever you're looking for, it's inside, and that's where you'll find it. And if you have a desire to live a greater life, to expand the life you're living, to heal or release something, it's because it's in you, knocking at the door of your consciousness, and it's asking for you to recognize it, express it, and therefore experience it. So I'm going to share some of his most profound revelations, but first I want us to take a look at the man himself. He loved humanity. He had a great belief in our capacity for self-healing and positive change. In particular, one story shows the nature of this twinkly-eyed little man with this huge cranium. He was quite small with this big head. He kind of looked a little like an alien with a great big wide forehead, but twinkly eyes and eyebrows that went up like this. I have watched a couple of kinescopes that are now on YouTube. You can watch him. He's very articulate, beautiful. So you can see it coming through him. So this is a story that was told to us ministers at Asilomar about 30 years ago by Dr. William Hornaday, who was one of Ernest Holmes' proteges, who became one of the first ministers in this teaching, and was minister at the Founders Church in Los Angeles on the corner of 6th and Wilshire for I don't know, 50 years maybe. So he told this story. So there was an evening service at Founders Church. And the protocol was when everyone was seated, and there was about 1,200 people in the audience, Dr. Holmes would walk down the center aisle and sit in the front row. So the evening that he spoke about, Dr. Holmes entered on the arm of a young woman who was obviously a lady of the night, a business girl. And she was dressed and made up accordingly. There was an audible gasp as he escorted her down the aisle and set her down next to him in a place of honor. Imagine the buzz. Can you imagine the church ladies tisk, tisk, tisking? So after the service, the tradition was that Dr. Holmes would leave first. And he did that with the lady of the evening on his arm. And the assembled group walked behind him. I think they wanted to see what was going to happen. And in plain sight of them, he walked her across the street into a little hotel. Well, that really set people to buzz. After an hour or so, Dr. Hornaday got a phone call from Dr. Holmes with a list of things he wanted brought to the room. And that took about an hour to gather them, and it was done, and then another hour passed. And eventually, after 3 hours or so, Dr. Holmes emerged with this young woman on his arm, and now she was dressed neatly and cleanly like a college co-ed. Her hair in a ponytail, her face scrubbed clean. He called for a cab and instructed the driver to take her to the Greyhound bus station, where tickets were waiting for her to take her back home. While tongues were wagging, he was talking to her, convincing her of her self-worth, of her potential, that she had a right to a happy life no matter what had happened before. This is the nature of the teaching, is to change our mind about ourselves. He got through to her, and she agreed to let the life go and find herself again. He was that way with everybody who crossed his path. He was always teaching principle, and that's kind of my guidance for my ministry. We're always teaching each other principle, not by saying what's wrong, but by telling us a higher truth. Last week, I spoke to a group of people at Cal State who were in a group called 60 Plus, and they were taking a class in science and religion, and they were interested in our teaching. And our president, Barbara Delia, arranged for us to be there. And I spoke to them quite a while. It was very interesting. But one of the comments made by a gentleman there said, anyone could hear the truth unless they're mentally ill. Well, apparently, that was not true if Dr. Holmes was with them. There are many stories that whenever he visited those who were considered mentally ill, in his presence, they were perfectly lucid and amazed their doctors. They couldn't get over the shift in these people. And of course, what was happening was he saw through the appearance to the real person, to the soul, what was there. And like Jesus, quickened it. Quickened the self, the knowing that was within. This is something that we can all do for each other if we stop focusing on what's wrong and start focusing on the truth, whatever it may be. Seeing through, and that's a tricky business because it involves compassion rather than sympathy. It involves empathy and seeing through the illusion of lack, limitation, ill health to the whole person inside. And it triggers a memory or a recognition, because we all know this deeply inside. So one of his famous statements, which I really love and which really got me when I first started this teaching, you've heard me say it before, but don't ever forget this one. He said, God makes everything out of itself by becoming the thing it makes. And I always add, and so do we. The thing we make is our life. And we make it out of ourselves. And Thomas Troward last week told us how. He said the most important two words in any language are, I am. Yes, I am. And what we add on to that It's our proclamation of the life we intend to live or expect to live or what we think is possible, what we add on to I am. So God makes everything out of itself by becoming the thing it makes, and so do you, and so do I. And that's what it means to be made in the image and likeness of this conscious universe that is projecting its intelligence through a field of love, bringing about the visible evidence of itself. Wow. The two most important words in any language are I am, and Holmes, of course, knew that himself. And so he developed a system that I call the evolution of prayer. And it's spiritual mind treatment. And it is where we speak about what is, spirit being all, God, whatever you want to call it, universal mind, this field of potential, and that it must be in some way embodied in us because we are conscious of it, because we feel it, because we know it's there, we see the visible evidence of it, and so we can't be separate from it. And then once we realize that there's one power, one life, one mind, one truth, one presence, nothing but that, you could say God is all there is. I cannot be separate from it. It is mine to download. It is mine to tap into. That is my genius. The field that is, and I can tap into it by saying, I am. Not, I want God to heal my body, but I am whole and healthy and vitally alive right now. That anything else is an illusion. Anything else is a temporary manifestation of stress, of old ideas, of something that's not true. He called them false beliefs. It is a very powerful technique when it is done properly, and we do teach it in our classes. He was influenced by Christian Science, which everybody was back in those days. Christian Science was the first venture into metaphysical spirituality, if you will, in modern times. But he evolved it. He wasn't against anything. So here's what he said. If you have a headache, take an aspirin. But if your headaches are chronic, figure out what the mental equivalent is and release it. Get a better idea about yourself, because a chronic headache comes from chronic stress, and stress is a mental condition which is attached to some belief that's false. So it's producing the false equivalent of itself. He knew that ultimately all healing is self-initiated, but that it can come through doctors. It can come through all sorts of healing modalities. Whatever appeals to the person, if they're led into it, it's probably right for them. But never think it's the thing that's doing it, it's the self, finding its own way to create the effect of health. And it's something we believe in. That's how it all works. So when I first came into this teaching, one of his lessons that had such a deep impact on me, I was one of those students that just couldn't get enough. You know, I was just crackling alive with this stuff. It was like finally something that makes sense. One of the things he said was, the creative process is always in motion. It never stops. There's no stopping and starting in spirit. The universe is constantly creating itself, moment by moment by moment by moment. And our role is to get in sync with it, give it something to create for us. Our role is to say what we want to see created in our life. But the process, we don't start it. You know, we don't have to convince God to do something through us by means of us. It's already attempting to. In fact, it already is. Everything in my life right now and everything in your life right now is the result of us co-creating it, allowing it to be, right? Yeah, you have to own that one. You have to. If you're going to take power in your life, you have to own it, that it's all power. It's not sometimes this happens and that happens, but all the time we are interacting with this creative process, which loves us unconditionally because it allows us to completely make it mistakes. It allows us to create ill health. It allows us to create lack and poverty. It allows us to create discord and conflict. But all the time it is available for peace, love, joy, prosperity, ongoing supply, abundance, and opulence. That's what it's attempting to do. But the fact that we have individual use of it gives us these various degrees of it. See, it's all variation on the same theme, right? I can't wait for next month. We're going to talk about love all month. What's love got to do with it? What's love got to do with anything? What's love got to do with your money? That's the first talk on February 3rd. It's like, if love is the answer, what is the question? Anything you could ask, right? So, if we feel stuck, and everybody has at some point, or maybe right now, it's because we haven't entered into consciously using the process of co-creating a new idea into form. And usually, why would we not do that if we know about it? Because we're doubting it. Because we're attributing cause to something else. There's a little voice that might say, well, maybe that's true in some cases, but not right now with the way the world is. It's always the same law. Electricity was here in biblical times, didn't know how to use it, right? Gravity's always been here. We don't know how to transcend it to go to the moon. It's the law is the law is the law. It never varies. And the law is, it is done unto us as we believe. Wow, that's a great gift. All right? So if we feel stuck, we want to enter in. Now, how do we do that? With new ideas, with the willingness to start again, with the claiming of our spiritual inheritance, with acting as though it were, fake it till you make it, announce what you want as if it were already so. That's the process of spiritual mind treatment. That's what we're asked to do. So our practice is to entertain new ideas about our own life, and we don't get them from out there. You know where they come from? They arise in silence. Sometimes they come in our dreams. You ever wake up with a great idea and you dreamt about it the night before? Ask for a new idea. The genius will produce it. What is it Emerson said about this genius? When it comes, this power, when it comes through our mind, it's genius. When it comes through our will, it's virtue. When it comes through our affections, it's love. Well, when it comes as an answer, it's an idea. It's an idea that's appropriate to us, that which we can use to create a new experience. So Dr. Holmes taught the mechanics, and in class we learn the mechanics. It's like anything else. If you're going to fix your own car, you got to know how it works, right? But most of us just get in and turn it on and go. But if you really want to get the full use of this teaching, you want to learn how it works. So that's what we're doing in class right now. The mystical side of it is something that happens when we realize how much life is for us and never against us. We begin to feel that presence. We begin to feel joyful. We begin to feel there's something else. There's something it is aware of me, and it responds to me in some way. Life responds by corresponding. It responds to us by corresponding to our most energized idea, our conviction. Dr. Holmes also taught the practice of inner peace, the mystical way of awakening through silence. And he quoted Indian scripture. This is one of my favorite quotes about what happens in meditation, what happens in silence. It's a very interesting statement, and I wish I could tell you who first said it, but I think it came from the Rig Veda. They said, I, the imperfect, adore my own perfect. Wow. That's what prayer is. It's not talking to some guy in the sky. It's going within. I, the imperfect, this flawed personality with its quirks and its this and its that, I adore who I really am. I bow down to that self, which is universal in nature, pretending to be an individual. Isn't that a beautiful statement? Think about it today. And when you sit in your meditation, if you have trouble meditating, start with that. Just say it out loud. I, the imperfect, adore my own perfect. He was very much interested in the mystical traditions of the East, which we used to call Oriental teachings. It was all there. He could see it. Emerson saw it. Troard saw it. It's all in those ancient teachings. He saw it in the teachings of Jesus. And when he quoted that, I, the imperfect, adore my own perfect, he was saying, this is what happens when we allow our mind to be still and turn away from the problem, turn away from the condition, Turn away from the world for a while and just be. Just be. And what we do is we tap into our own divinity, that little spark, which equates with boundless potential. That's what our divinity is. It's our potential, right? So every great teacher does that. Every great teacher teaches silence, and it's nearly impossible to discover our own spiritual power if we are completely outwardly directed. We've got to have a balance, right? You got to have some work and some play. You've got to have some activity and some rest, just like your body. The heart beats and rests, beats and rest, beats and rest. If it just beats, we're in trouble, right? So we have to have that balance. We have to seek it because the world is not set up to give it to us. It's up to us to seek that balance. So he said, this is another great one, spiritual thought force is greater than any objective condition or any apparent resistance to it. A spiritualized thought is greater than any manifestation of any kind. One of my favorite teachers is Dr. Larry Dossey, who was an internist, a very famous physician in Texas, and he wrote a book called Recovering the Soul because he said, I have experienced and witnessed so many spontaneous healings, I cannot ignore them any longer. I cannot say it was a misdiagnosis any longer. Something happens to people, and it happens all the time, but we never hear about it. We never hear about it. Why? Yeah, we could name all sorts of reasons. So when someone from that field says it, you listen to it a little more. And he cites in his book, Recovering the Soul, dozens of cases of people who have had these spontaneous healings. A healing is not fixing something. It's the reassertion of the wholeness matrix right now. So we are always whole. Our true self has never been sick or hurt or anything. And when we have a spontaneous reawakening, the wholeness pattern reemerges. I was telling the class the other day at the 60-plus group that I have literally seen in my own experience treating for people, I have seen tumors disappear overnight, where someone was scheduled for surgery, and we treated, and the next day they went in and it wasn't there. This is not uncommon. In fact, it's quite common. What we call miracles are ordinaries. And we're living in, an Ernest Holmes said, a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws, and we interact with it when we think. So one of the things I said in a talk earlier when I first came here was a quote. He said, give me 1,000 people who are for something and against nothing, and we'll change the world. So I'm going to ask you today to make a list of what you're for. I don't care what you're against. I don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear what I'm against, do you? You want to hear what I'm for, right? We're for a world that works for everyone. We're for love and joy to be the operative energies of our relationships, even the casual ones, right? We're for wholeness and vitality demonstrating itself through the bodies of ourselves and our friends. We're for an end to anything unlike that. We're for a reclaiming of our spiritual heritage and our wholeness. We're for humanity. And so let's make a list today in our own life, because this will be quite shifting. I did it last night. I thought, oh my gosh. And it's kind of like a gratitude list, but it's a little bit on a different level. If you make a list of everything you're really for, you will uncover the knots in your thinking that have been causing a little bit, some problems perhaps, maybe health, maybe money, maybe relationship. Because you'll discover what you're against, and you want to raise that up and turn it into what you're for. In 1960, after a life of being always healthy, he had some little medical thing that put him in the hospital. I think it was a little heart attack, but he was quite conscious and aware. And he called in all of his practitioners who were, praying and treating that he would be whole and perfect again. And he said, stop it. I want to leave. Stop treating for me. I want to go be with Hazel, his wife who had died 3 years earlier. And when they did, he did. He made his transition in a very conscious way. He didn't teach reincarnation because he said he couldn't prove it, but he did believe that we are immortal now, that there is a continuum that we're part of, and that it goes on eternally forever and ever. And he said, why would I come back here when there's so much in the universe to explore? That was very typical his kind of thinking. His birthday was last Monday, January 21st. So he wrote many books, but the last thing he wrote was The Voice Celestial with his brother Fenwick. It was a beautiful, long poem of realization and love, very mystical. So you and I are involved in a teaching whose time has come. And Ernest Holmes left us with a legacy that gives us the keys to the kingdom. You know, Jesus said the kingdom's within, right? The key is the mind. It is cause, it is cure. But it asks of us that we develop spiritual self-reliance, that we love ourselves, and that we participate in the great awakening by how we live each day. That's it. What a legacy. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. So it is. Let's go into treatment. All right, if you'll join me, we'll use that wonderful gift that he gave us. The gift of recognizing that life is an ongoing expression of pure love and absolute intelligence. That there's only one power. There's not two or three or four. There's one something being all, revealing itself through the universe and all life, being you and being me and individualizing itself and personifying itself for the joy of experiencing life in this dimension. And so each one of us is a gift to God. Each one of us is an answer to its question. What is life like in form? What could I do with hands and feet? This power is responsive to us. It hears every word we say, every thought we think, and prompts us to express what's really true. It prompts us to love, to prosper, to be whole and complete, to be strong and flexible. It prompts us to reach out, to care, to have compassion. It prompts us to challenge old ideas and bring new ones in. It prompts us to be brave in the face of stupidity. It prompts us to discover what we are for and announce it. And this power and this presence is right where I am, right where you are all the time. How could it be anywhere else? This conscious universe is conscious within us, by means of us. And so today we can say with full assurance, this center and everyone in it is an answer to the age-old question. How can we create a world that works for everyone? A world of equality and respect. A world of sufficiency and plenty. A world where everyone shares in the good. A world of individual expression uniting as a beloved community. We are the answer. The question is, who do we think we are? Will we take up this great gift, this legacy, and announce it as ours? And so today we affirm, I am, and you might want to say this out loud, I am the joy of being. I am the way in for God to express. My life is its vehicle to show its perfection. I am healthy, wealthy, and loved. I love being me. I love my life. I love this center. I praise it. I promote it. I participate in it. I fulfill the promise that Ernest Holmes made when he said, The day is coming when science and religion shall walk hand in hand, when each person will know their value, when peace will reign supreme on planet Earth. We give thanks for that. We let it be, and so it is.